I'd like to thank Susan for arranging for this to happen. Mark Peterson sent an email out a while back about this cute couple, and we're excited to have them here. And I'm going to let Mark introduce them and tell us a little bit about yourself. He's a professor at BYU. I know that much.
My name is Mark Peterson. I teach at BYU. I teach Korean. And in my association there, I came across this couple who have escaped from North Korea. They have a remarkable story to tell. First, I want to thank you all for inviting us to come here. I love Spanish Fork. I bike out here. I'm a biker. In regard to our speakers today, they escaped from North Korea, and their story is quite remarkable. They are technically refugees, but legally not refugees, because when they got out, they first accepted citizenship in South Korea, which obviated their chances of getting American refugee status. They don't have two quarters to rub together, in effect. They're here as students. They're not undocumented. They are documented. They are students. But as such, they're under restrictions of the kind of work that they can do. They can only basically work on campus and a little bit of particular off-campus work. But one thing they can do is tell their story. And as we were talking about their situation and no money and how to make money until they can get out of school, they're in the English Academy, the English Training Center, first at BYU, now they've switched to UVU. They want to get started in academic work at UVU and then hopefully transfer back to BYU to finish their work. And then hopefully down the road, some employer will say, hey, these people are unique, we really need them in my job, and that will be the way that we can get them citizenship. They're working on their English, they'll be reading their text. Their story is a gold mine. And so we've worked together with a Korean published author here in the Valley, Korean American gal, to write up their story. And it's completed in Korean. We're searching for a publisher now, and we're also having it translated by a bestseller translator into English. The story is quite remarkable. It starts with an introductory chapter, and then there's Jake's story, then Vivian's story, Jake's story, and Vivian's story, Jake's story, Vivian's story. It goes back and forth because they each have separate stories. They each got out separately. They'll tell you a little bit about how they got out. But they're practicing on you in the hopes that we can get into the school assembly circuit that pays some money. And if you know of any other civic organizations around that pay money, they would like that. They're nervous to see the camera here, so they're really nervous about their face going out. So we've changed just since we've been eating and talking about it. He doesn't want their faces to be seen here, because with contemporary technology, some good-willed student here would see the story and say, hey, I want to download this. And they could copy it off your local cable and put it out. So sorry to change the rules of the games on you right at the last minute, but that's the way it is. Okay, so there's a little bit of danger involved. And as they tell you their story, there was a lot of danger involved. Jake, when he tells his story, will tell about, he has a phrase that he's got in his script that says, more times than he can count, he hovered on the threshold between life and death. And his escape was a very perilous escape. There's a little bit of humor involved as well. He'll tell you a funny incident along the way. So let me introduce to you first Jake Kim. His Korean name is, but he's taken on the American name Jake to make it easier for life in America. And her name is Vivian Kim. Her original name is, in Korea, women don't take their husband's name, their husband's surname and such. So first Jake and then Vivian.
Hello. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me here today. I also thank for Professor Mark Peterson for helping us to have this opportunity. Yeah. My name is Duyeon Kim. I was born in a small city in North Korea. I lived there for the first 27 years old of my life. In 2009, the year I turned 27 years old, I escaped from North Korea, and in the same year, arrived in South Korea. It took me 3 months to take that journey, a time in which I found myself hovering on the threshold between life and death more times than I can count. Today, I would like to speak about why I left North Korea and relate some of the experiences I had during that process. The North Korean government has mastered the art of brainwashing its people to be loyal to Kim Il-sung and his family. Like anyone born in North Korea, from the time I was born, I was brainwashed with the uncountable lies of the North Korean government, and I sincerely believed in its teachings as I grew up. In that place, freedom of travel, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and other freedoms are completely non-existent. Most North Koreans are not allowed under any condition to leave the country. Even traveling within the country from city to city requires a special visa from the government. Also, people are unable to speak freely about the things they witness and feel about their country. If anyone is found to say anything even slightly negative about the Kim administration, they immediately become subject to the death penalty. Where else in the modern world can someone be killed for a simple comment? Religious freedom is also non-existent. The people in North Korea still have no idea what Christmas is and have never heard the name Jesus Christ. The simple act of believing in God is enough to endanger one's life. Even the thoughts and expression of the people are constantly controlled by the dictatorial government. The first sentence children in North Korea learn to say is "Thank you" to the great leader Kim Il-sung. The North Korean government brainwashes us to believe that it is because of Kim Il-sung that we were able to be born into this world, go to school, eat and live, and that it is he and his family who keep us safe from the United States. They teach us that if it weren't for him, we might as well be dead, that even after he died, he lives on with us. But when I looked around and saw the people starving to death and the people being executed without reason, I started to feel disillusioned with the weak, oppressive dictatorship. As I began to become interested in ideas like freedom and human rights, I started to realize that something was wrong with the world I was living in. From the moment I started to have these realizations, a single goal, a dream took shape in my mind. First, I have a question for you. What is your greatest dream in life? You don't need to answer. My greatest dream, one desire, was something that all of you, if you want, can do at any time. I simply wanted to see the world outside of North Korea. I wanted to know so badly how people outside of North Korea lived their lives. My curiosity tormented me. However, my terror of death made it hard to make my decision. One thing that made me feel justified in my hesitation was the worsening health of Kim Jong-il. As I saw that our dictator would not live much longer, I dared to hope that things might change. But when I was hesitating to make my decision, Kim Jong-il was dying and his son appeared in his place. My hope was gone, but so was my hesitation. I had made up my mind. Rather than living the rest of my life under the rule of the third generation of the Kim line, I felt that I preferred to die in the pursuit of freedom. I was finally able to muster the courage to begin a journey I knew may end in death. Of course, I could have been killed as I crossed the river into China. If I were caught, I have been sent to a concentration camp, and that scared me terribly. But what frightened me more was the thought that I might not see my beloved wife again. I wanted to share everything with her, but I also did not want to endanger her. In fact, I had committed that if I were caught by the government during my escape, I would end my own life, because I knew all too well what would happen if I were sent to prison. I lied to my wife, telling her that I had to leave town for business for about 15 days, and that I would be back afterwards. At that point, we were in our second year of marriage and were extremely happy newlyweds. I knew that if I revealed my true plan, she would insist that she would risk death to accompany me or try to convince me to stay in North Korea with her. When the train came to the platform, I held back my tears and tried hard to smile at her. I knew very well that this moment might be our last. That was the hardest moment of my entire life. Eventually, I arrived at a small town on the border of North Korea and China. There, I had several dangerous experiences, but I want to share just one episode with you today. I went to near the river on the border and hid myself in cornfield to stake out the situation. I knew that China was just on the other side of that river, on a path not far from where I was hiding. I could see military border guards walking back and forth on the side of that river. I laid silently in the corn on my stomach, observing them. One of the soldiers, holding his gun, suddenly started to walk straight toward me. While I was wondering what I should do, he got closer and closer. It was too late to run away. I imagined what was about to happen to me and realized I may have to make my final decision. My wife's face flashed in front of my eyes, and I prepared myself. I looked up and saw that the soldier was standing in the corn only a couple of meters away from me. At that moment of sheer terror, something funny happened. I heard the tinkling sound of water. He had only come in my direction to relieve himself. The soldier then turned around and rejoined his comrades. He hadn't seen me at all. For the next several minutes, my tense body could not move. I did make it across the border, but for the next 3 months, I nearly lost my life again and again as I traveled through China, Laos, and Thailand on my way to go South Korea. Many people live their lives without feeling gratitude for the air that we breathe, and without realizing how precious their freedom truly is. At this very moment, there are people in the world who are desperately wishing for that very freedom, who are risking their lives to have a chance at gaining it. If we allow ourselves to feel grateful for the freedom we have, we might feel a sense of responsibility to do something for those who are living without it and dying for it. You too can help those people. Simply knowing and caring for those people will make the beginning of a difference. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Duyon's wife. My name is Jiyeon. English name is Vivian. Today, I want to share about my life after my husband escaped and how we met again. This is our love story. The 2 years after our marriage were the happiest years of my life. We loved each other more than anything, and we did everything together. Every once in a while, when my husband would leave town on business, I was so sad that I would cry and cry. We started a small business together. We didn't make much money, but we had enough to get by. Then one day, my husband told me he had to leave town on business for 15 days. 15 days passed, and then a month. But my husband didn't come back. I started to think he might never come back. Now, all I could do was wait, not knowing if he was dead or alive. I thought I might have to wait my whole life. I waited for the moment when he would suddenly burst back through the door, but he didn't. Later, I just cried and cried, never knowing if they were tears of resentment or blame. Every evening when I went to sleep, I silently hoped that my eyes wouldn't open the next morning. I hated the rising sun that told me another day was about to start. The thought of spending another day without my husband was absolutely agonizing. I kept thinking about my husband's last words to me at the train station, replaying them over and over again in my head. I regretted so much that I hadn't understood what he meant at that time. He said to me, "You don't have to stay here. We don't have to stay here, you know? What if there was a better place for us? We could go and live there." I had assumed at the time that he was talking about another city in North Korea. My husband was the whole world to me, my reason for living. There was no reason for me to live anymore. For almost a year, I sat alone in my room, surrounded by things he had touched: clothes, pictures, blankets. Then one day, I got a phone call. On the other end, I heard the voice of a man I had never heard before. The stranger told me he had met my husband and that he wanted to check up on me. I said, hello, but whoever it was had already hung up. That was a year after he left me. When I heard his name for the first time, it was like waking up from a dream. My heart started to race. For several moments, I sat there in shock. Somewhere in this world, he was alive. He wasn't dead. And I realized one other thing as well. He was somewhere where he couldn't call me, somewhere outside of North Korea. From that day on, every time my phone rang, it sounded like thunder. My heart stopped whenever I heard it. Then one day, I answered the phone to the voice of the stranger. He told me that if I wanted to see my husband again, I must do exactly as he said. After telling me the name of a city on the northern border, he told me to go there and wait for him at a certain time and place. I got on the train and went to meet him there. I went to the place he had told me, a place where lots of people were coming and going next to a small shop. As I had promised him, I wore a gray coat and glasses and stood there waiting for him. Because we didn't know each other's faces, we could only recognize each other's by our clothes. The time we had agreed upon came and went, and still everyone passed by me. No one had approached me. 1 hour passed, but I couldn't move from that spot. I felt that if I didn't meet the stranger in that place, it would mean that I would be cut off from my husband forever. Then, when 30 more minutes had passed, someone in the crowd of people passed in front of me. I heard him whisper, "Follow me." Without even looking at me, he continued to walk forward. I followed him without a word. He looked around and saw that no one had followed us and came to stop. He pulled out a small piece of paper. He said, "This is your husband's phone number. Tonight, we will go outside of the city and climb a mountain. There, we can call your husband." That night, we went to the mountain on the border where the radar of the security department could not reach us. We called the number on the piece of paper. As the phone rang several times, my heart beat so loudly. I was sure it was audible. A few seconds later, a voice answered. "Hello?" It was my husband's voice. I couldn't say a word. All of the sorrow and fear of the past suddenly burst out of me. And I sobbed and sobbed. My husband told me it was okay, that he was alive, and stopped crying. After several minutes, he asked me softly, "Vivian, do you want to come to me?" He asked my opinion carefully and with hesitation, because we both knew that the road to where he was could very well end in my death. Many people, in their attempts to escape the country, were shot and killed as they crossed the border. From the moment I had realized my husband was no longer in North Korea, I had continually thought to myself that if I could just see him for even a second, even if I was shot on the spot, I would do it. Without hesitation, I told him that I would go to him. That is how I came to risk my life in my escape from North Korea. A day before the day I had decided to run, I was able to speak with my husband on the phone one more time. On the phone, my husband quietly said to me, "Vivian, pray to God. Pray to Him and ask Him to bring you safely to me. If you do, He will hear your prayer." I asked, "Who is God? And what is praying?" He told me that God lives up in the sky, and that asking Him for the things we need most is called praying. So I promised him I would pray. He then asked me to make just one more promise. Whatever happens, whatever terrible situation you find yourself in, please don't end your life. I promise you that wherever you are in the world, whatever happens to you, I will come and save you. Don't end your life. He was worried that if I was caught and arrested, I would kill myself. I told him that I would never die before I could see him again. The next night, I walked to the border. It was end of December. The night sky was dark. I was seized with fear and felt certain that at any moment, someone would grab onto me from behind. The river was frozen thick. I carefully put one foot forward into the water. The sound of the thin ice cracking was like thunder in my ears. Before I could think anymore, I started to cross the river. I was sure I was about to hear the sound of gunfire in my direction. With every step across the ice, I was surprised to still be alive. When I made it to the Chinese side of the river, I realized that I was still alive and that I was no longer in North Korea. But that was little comfort. I was not safe yet, for if I were caught in China, I would immediately be sent back. I climbed up the river bank with all my strength. As I climbed up, I was brought to a stop when I scraped my hand on something in the river bank. There was a barbed wire fence in front of me, blocking the way. Unable to think of what was behind or before me, I climbed up 3 meters of barbed wire. To this day, I have no idea how I was able to climb up that high barbed wire fence. All I remember is that one moment I stood frozen in front of the barbed wire fence, and the next moment I was standing safely on the other side. My hands were scraped up and bleeding, and the front of my clothes were torn apart. A superhuman strength I didn't even know I had somehow got me over the top of that fence. This is how I left North Korea. When I was in North Korea, I was a simple wife who knew nothing of human rights, freedom, or world peace. When I was there, I wasn't starving or in danger. I was able to eat and live comfortably. I risked my life to escape that country because of love. We have very little and live very simple life, but I am happier than anyone in the world. I am so happy because I'm with my beloved husband. That fact that I can wake up to the rising sun every morning and spend another day with him makes me the happiest person in the world. Thank you.
Quite a story. Jake knew that God protected him to get him out. There were several other near misses. And so he said to Vivian, "Pray to God." And she said, "Who's God? What's prayer?" Isn't that incredible?